Moto X Force hands-on review. What is the Moto X Force? Sitting at the top of Motorola's 2015 lineup, ahead of the Moto X Play and Moto X Style, the Moto X Force has one standout feature: a display that shouldn't crack, shatter, or break if you drop it. When phones are seemingly becoming more delicate, a handset that is able to handle greater wear and tear should appeal to many people. While it isn't perfect, the Moto X Force ends an pretty decent year from Motorola. It's powerful, rugged, and has a seriously impressive battery. If you're a clumsy person, this could be the phone for you. Moto X Force display and shatter shield tech. Normally I'd kick off a review talking about the build and design of a phone, but with the Moto X Force it's really the display that draws the eye. It's not interesting because of its 5.4-inch Quad HD resolution. That's nice to see, though pretty much run-of-the-mill with flagship devices in 2015, but down to the unique tech and the method by which the display is put together. In an effort to make the Moto X Force its most durable phone to date, Motorola is using something called Shatter Shield technology. It's basically a 5-layer system that protects the actual 2560 x 1440 panel, so if you knock it off a table onto the concrete floor below, it should survive. I'm happy to report that it actually works really well. I dropped the phone more than 50 times in a bid to smash the phone. There's a video above to prove it, but failed miserably. The panel still works perfectly. An iPhone SIXS, Samsung Galaxy S6 or Nexus 6P put through even a couple of drops would leave you with a seriously cracked device. While the Moto X Force's display didn't shatter, it did pick up a few scratches. That's pretty impressive, but it isn't perfect. Now, it does seem that having all this protection takes something away from the overall quality of the screen. Firstly, there's a noticeable gap between the outer layer, a built-in screen protector of sorts, and the display. This is especially noticeable when you put it side by side with a handset featuring a laminated display, such as the iPhone SIXS. This gap can sometimes make things on the display look a little blurry, especially under bright lights, and outdoor use is hampered by just how reflective the screen is. Nevertheless, if you've had to replace one too many phones as a result of drops and shattered displays, then I'd seriously recommend taking a look at the Moto X Force. Moto X Force build and design. Instead of playing up to this durable nature with swathes of thick plastic and ruggedest corners, the Moto X Force is actually a pretty well-designed handset. The metal rims flow smoothly into the slightly curved back panel, which is constructed from a grippy fabric. If you want something a little classier, there's a pebbled leather version on offer too. Moto X Force software and performance. Just like every other Motorola device released in 2015, the Moto X Force runs a pretty much stock build of Android, just the way Google intended. The release of the Force seems to have come just a bit too soon for Marshmallow, though. It comes with Lollipop 5.1.1, but considering Motorola has said M is coming, hopefully we won't have to wait too long. Motorola has made a few nice improvements to the software, although it is possible to use the Moto X Force as a stock Android device if that's what you prefer. Moto Display pulses the screen when you receive a notification, while Moto Assist silences any noises when it knows you're in a meeting. Having a clean build of Android also helps the Moto X Force to feel speedy. Internally, it has the most impressive spec sheet of any Motorola device this year. There's a Snapdragon 810 processor handling the majority of the grunt, paired with 3 GB of RAM. Lag is almost non-existent. Apps open up as soon as you tap the icon, and even intensive games such as Hitman Sniper run smoothly without a dropped frame. The phone comes with 32 GB of internal storage as standard. There's a 64 GB option available too, along with a micro SD card slot for upping this further. While the Moto X style has some of the best speakers in the game, the Moto X Force is lacking here. They're still front-facing, but they lack volume, are on the tinny side and overall are just disappointing. Call quality is pretty much on a par with other Moto handsets, so there won't be any complaints from people at the other end of the line who can't hear your dulcet tones. Moto X Force battery. Although 2015 hasn't been the best year for phone batteries, the Moto X Force does a really good job of trying to change that. I can safely say that from all the devices I've reviewed in the past 6 months, this one goes for the longest. Considering there's a 3,760 mAh cell inside, this longevity shouldn't come as a surprise. During my testing, the Moto X Force consistently lasted 2 full days of heavy use. Streaming a 50-minute episode of Jessica Jones on Netflix consumed 7%. That's seriously good, and an hour playing Monument Valley took the battery from 70% to 63%. If battery is of the utmost importance to you, it's definitely worth checking out the Moto X Force. Moto X Force camera. Taking care of photos on the Moto X Force is the same 21-megapixel camera that Motorola used in both the Play and Style handsets. It features phase detection autofocus as opposed to a laser-assisted system and a dual LED flash. Just like the other two devices, the Moto X Force has a good knack for taking strong daylight photos. Thanks to the high megapixel count, shots are full of detail even when you zoom right in. Colors are accurate, it doesn't overexpose light sources, and the autofocus is spot on. Things deteriorate somewhat with moving subjects. This can probably be put down to the lack of OIS, and trying to capture sports is tough. My other major annoyance is still the stock camera app. While it's nice to be able to open it with a quick shake of the wrist, the fact that instead of tapping to focus it's tap to shoot is infuriating. Video can be captured at either 1080p, slow mo at 720p and 4K, and they all look decent. Note that the latter does suffer from the odd dropped frame and some stuttering, however. On the front of the Force is a 5-megapixel selfie lens. That's fine, but it pales in comparison to the one included on the Nexus 6P. Should I buy the Moto X Force? If you want a phone that can go the distance and won't shatter after a close encounter with a pavement, then you could do a lot worse than take a serious look at the Moto X Force. But, it's not for everyone. It may be powerful, but it's also chunky, wide, and in many ways more difficult to hold than your typical flagship. Even though the screen is smaller. I'm also not completely convinced by the display. Yes, it's shatterproof and managed to survive being thrown around constantly for about an hour. However, the actual panel is recessed to such a level that there's a noticeable gap between it and the outer layer. While I could cut Motorola some slack for the less than perfect camera on the Moto X style, that was of course a £350 phone, it's harder to stomach on a handset that costs £500. Especially when cheaper phones such as the Nexus 6P and Samsung Galaxy S6 offer much better optics.